quiet comfort headphones. Hear the difference Bose technology makes.
Big battle is brewing right about now over a group of convicted sex offenders living under a bridge in Florida. The state is trying to dissolve their community, but the child molesters say that the Julia Tuttle Causeway is one of the few places they can legally live because sex offender laws ban them from living within 2,500 feet of schools, playgrounds, and other places where children might gather. And the men say it's unfair that they're being forced out.
It's just absurd. It's absurd. They put me here and now they got to tell me I got to leave. And now that they actually find a place, now they want us to leave. And all we ask them is why.
Well, joining us right now, Dave Aronberg, the State Senate Minority Whip in Florida. Mr. Aronberg, so they say they don't have anywhere else to go. What do you say?
Well, the amazing thing about these laws is that they're actually very weak. These laws only apply between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., which means that between those hours, sex offenders have to stay away from parks, libraries, and schools. But there are no children at parks, libraries, and schools between those hours.
So they're allowed to go there in the daytime?
Absolutely, which is why these laws make people feel good, but in reality, they are very weak. They need to be a 24-hour floating restriction to keep them away from schools, parks, and playgrounds at all times.
Okay.
But in reality, they're very weak, and they can actually be counterproductive because I can't imagine a more dangerous situation than to have a colony of desperate, homeless sex offenders roaming around our streets.
Right, but okay, but let's talk specifically about the guys who are living under the bridge. I mean, their point is that they have nowhere else to go, and it seems that they've almost set up kind of like a, I don't know, like a leper colony, like the one place they can go that they're allowed to be that isn't near a school. You know, I'm not defending them, but should they be allowed to be there?
Well, what you have are a series of inconsistent local ordinances that are very different depending on where you are. And in Miami-Dade County, the sex offenders you profiled, because of those restrictions, they are living under bridges, which is a terrible situation. I have a bill that hopefully will pass this year that will create just a better law, which will have more electronic monitoring so we know where they are at all times. We'll have a 24-hour-a-day restriction, 600 feet around schools, parks, and libraries at all times, and we'll have a statewide 1,500-foot law, and that way we can have a safer community instead of this terrible situation we have now. Okay,
will your bill specifically, though, ban them from setting up shop in places like this area underneath the bridge?
Well, because there's no law against being homeless, the hope is that they won't have to be homeless if there is a 1,500 residency restriction, 1,500-foot residency restriction, that they'll be able to find a place to live. Plus, we'll know where they are at all times, not just 8 hours a day, because they'll be wearing an ankle monitoring bracelet, and we'll have a 24-hour-a-day law. The hope is that once our law passes, this whole problem will be fixed.
Okay, and so are you predicting then that ultimately this colony underneath the bridge will be shut down and these men will go elsewhere?
Well, if our law passes, they will be able to find a place to live, and they'll stay away from schools, parks, and playgrounds. But if it doesn't pass, then you can see this problem growing larger and larger every day. A year ago, there were only about 3 sex offenders living under bridges. A year later, there are 27, and this is a terrible, dangerous situation, and the politicians need to have some courage and get involved.
Dave Aronberg, the State Senate Minority Whip in Florida. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
And it could be months before the Democrats finally know who their presidential nominee is.